Hello and welcome to our Q&A with producer Jacob Bricca of the film Missing in Brooks County. I'm Mary Dossinger, I'm the program manager, and we thank Jacob so much for being here with us today to talk about this incredible, poignant film that I have thought about long since I first watched it many months ago in our submissions process. It's really an incredible film. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Jacob.
Oh, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, we're really thrilled to be able to share this story with our audiences because I think it's a really incredible one. And one of the things that really struck me with the film, I've seen obviously a number of documentaries about border issues and things like that, but this one does something that I think no other film does. In particular, it's actually about an area not on the border. It's about 70 miles from the border in Texas, and so you learn all these different stories that you don't hear about on the news and in specific border issues. So as being someone from Arizona, where I know you have a number of border issues there as well, what brought you to Brooks County and what brought the filmmaking team to this story in particular, or all of these stories in particular?
So Lisa Malamont and Jeff Bemis heard a story on the radio about a forensic anthropologist in Brooks County, and they were both really interested by her story and just thought that this was something that it both interested them, and they ended up contacting the woman who was at the center of that radio story, and just kind of thought they were just learning things that, as they were going, and we managed to fund a very early trip for them to go down there for some exploratory research, as well as just a little bit of initial filming, and they found themselves there saying, wow, this is really interesting what's happening here. This is kind of incredible. So where's the border? And Dr. Lori Baker said, oh, the border's nowhere near here. We're actually nowhere near the border. And this kind of cemented in their minds, like, well, first of all, they had to get an answer to why that was the case, but that this was a story worth telling, and that maybe this was a story that could be both centered around people and also in some larger way as a sort of mosaic around a place, and to really give the audience a feeling of what it's like to live there in a place where these kinds of things are going on, as opposed to just a sort of an issue-oriented documentary.
Yeah, no, it's really amazing. And what was the time length then? When was that you initially went down there?
If I have my dates right, that was early 2015.
Wow. Okay.
And we wrapped
5 years of following.
We wrapped shooting about 1.5 years ago. So yeah, okay. It's a good 4.5 years or so that we were shooting on and off. So Jeff and Lisa, the co-directors, went down there 15 different times for a week or two each, and we, each time we learned new things, and each, that's where some of these stories came out. So the story of Homero, which is one of the two main stories, that came to us. We had a website by this point, by 2017. And someone, his brother and sister-in-law were on their search for their brother-in-law, and they Googled missing Brooks County, and they ended up on our website, and they wrote us saying, we're looking for our brother, is there anything, can you help us? And so we immediately connected them with Eddie Canales, who sort of anchors the film. But then we also asked them, we sort of met them and said, look, we're making this movie, like, could we meet you, and would you be willing to have your this story potentially be a part of the film? And they said yes, and they had all of these old recordings from when he first went missing, which is what a lot of that part of the film is anchored in, is, they just happened to actually save all of those audio recordings, like,
right.
on
they were
on a phone.
Moved from place to place and not getting the answers they wanted and everything. Yeah, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because you really do just get such a personal view of what people go through.
Yes.
And I mean, it's incredible. But so you also edited the film, is that correct?
Yeah, so my role is one of the 3 producers, along with Jeff and Lisa, and yes, I'm the editor of the film.
And that's just amazing, because I think one of the things that I've read about, but also that I felt while watching it, is you generally will have one protagonist that you're following, and this film has multiple protagonists, multiple stories over the course of 5 years. So how Did you personally even begin to take on that task of telling the story? Did you have that in mind as it went on, or did stories push you in certain directions? And I would just love to hear about that process, because it must have been incredibly hard, especially knowing their stories as well.
Yeah. Well, as with most verite documentaries, there's a lot that is shot that doesn't reach the screen.
Right.
So there were, there was one other major story and another minor one that we thought for a long time, we thought were going to be in the film. So part of what you do is simply, you have to sort of shoot things not really knowing what's going to occur, right? We're not making this stuff up, and we're not, except for the reenactment things once we have figured out what the story is. But, the vast majority of this, we are just following in real time. And nobody knows where that's going to go. So the first part of that question is, there's a lot of stuff that isn't in the film.
Right.
But
including when you first went down there to shoot.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Dr. Lori Baker is not in the film. It just turned out that she did, it was Dr. Kate Spradley who ended up being more intimately involved with, at that period of time, in Brooks County, and was just a more organic person to have in the film, and who was really a very willing participant. But it's just sort of a process of figuring out precisely how to structure the narrative so that the audience feels like they're on sort of firm ground, where they kind of feel that the film is going somewhere, and they are sort of settled. And that is it's almost always a process of a lot of trial and error. And, we did come down to knowing that these were the two main story, Juan's story and Homero's story. But in order to figure out exactly how to get all of the other information in, how precisely to weave between them, that was just a lot of trying things out. And eventually we did settle on Eddie Canales being, even though he does kind of connect to everything. He is in some way involved in all of the rest of what goes on there. He's being accused by Mike Vickers of being in bed with the traffickers. He is involved in the search for Homero. He is there when Juan's cousin just shows up. That was the story that really did happen, like in real time, where he just showed up and we were just shooting as that occurred. And so we sort of decided that Eddie was the way to sort of get the audience into the story and bring us to the other participants, the other people, and to sort of always sort of check back in with him. He, in a way, is sort of the moral center of the story. He's the one who feels the weight of it and who has sort of done things in his life to account for that.
On that line, did you have people that you really wanted to include, or stories you wanted to include that just decided they didn't want to? Because one of the things that always shocks me with documentaries is that I don't know that I would put myself on camera like that, especially with some of the stories that these people are dealing with from all sides of the situation. Because I do love that you really look at this from a humanistic standpoint from everyone involved, even the people that live in this town and are dealing with this, and how they reconcile that with themselves. And I really love that about the film. But did you have a problem with people really not wanting to be a part of it, or stepping back after they'd already been a part of it?
Surprisingly not. There's almost nothing. There were almost no cases like that, and I think that's just a testament to Lisa and Jeff's sort of sensitivity in being very very genuine about their intentions. And just doing the work. So, we also realize that we have a sort of an extra burden of being outsiders telling this story. And I think that was, so we have some advisors that we kept on bringing things back to. But in terms of meeting people, Eddie, Mike Vickers, Kate Spradley, even some of the other, people, Lavoisier Durham, who was in there real, with his big cowboy hat, they all actually have been interviewed by press before. So this is not like this, while I think most people don't know about this, it's not an entirely new story. But their experience with press tends to be someone showing up for half a day, doing a quick story and leaving. And that was not what we were doing. We were coming for weeks at a time, coming back again. And no one really knew what to make of us, so what is this again? And so we were as clear with them as we could be about what we thought, because we were also kind of trying to figure out what exactly this film would be. But I think that goes a long way. The kinds of stuff that didn't end up in the film is just sort of things that don't fit from in a story that has a coherence that we wanted it to. So for instance, there's a scene at the 911 call center, which is very disturbing as we hear a call from someone who is in a tree, having been chased up there by some coyotes or some dogs, and who is saying that they're out there, but they don't know where they are, right? They're just in no man's land, and they're just trying to get the coordinates when the call goes dead. They haven't gotten the coordinates. And, you see in the movie how difficult that is. You've got a call from somewhere out there in the brush. It is nearly impossible to find someone like that. So that was a scene that we really wanted in the film. And we, we were out with some of the local sheriff's deputies on that same night. So we had, they were actually looking for this person. But it's sort of like it didn't fit. There's a new film out called, it's not that new anymore, but Time, which is one of the Academy Award nominated films. I just saw that last week, and that is an astounding film. It covers a 20-year plus period of time. The film is 81 minutes. There's no, oftentimes one really has to be judicious about what one puts in a film so that it can, again, so that it does have the kind of coherence and tonal values that you want it to have.
No, it's true. I don't know how you guys did it either these stories are heart-wrenching from the beginning. When you see these bodies in the land, what these people are dealing with from the very beginning of the film, and I just really commend you on putting together a film that, while very difficult, also makes you feel empowered and also, wanting to go help. And I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about what's happened since the end of the film. Whatever you can tell us. And also I'm always curious with this is obviously something you want to get out into the world. And again, thank you for letting us do that at RiverRun. But I know it's played a number of places and you're really wanting to get it out there. And what are you trying to do, I guess, with the film? And have you seen any sort of steps taken in the area with either laws that are happening, anything you can provide us that's happened since the end of the film?
So I think, I think there are 3 questions there, and I'll try to remember them. So that I can answer them. What has happened since the film? Omero's family is still searching for him. I think you can tell in the film that there is it's all in just the looks on people's faces, but that some of the family members have essentially reconciled themselves to his probable death, right? And yet his mother is not there, and so they feel like they still want to keep searching, and of course they want to, at the very least, find his remains. Right. So that is sort of ongoing. Since the film is finished, what happened under the Trump administration was sort of an increased Border Patrol presence there, which there were definitely fewer crossers, but there were not fewer deaths, because what happened was essentially the trek became even more dangerous because the spot at which the smugglers would tend to drop their cargo off to run this very long journey through the brush was a longer one, because there was even more presence. So the problem didn't go away because of increased security. That's one thing that I think we're trying to lay out here, is that a militarized approach to border issues is not one that intersects nicely with humanitarian values. Right. And what we're doing to get it out there, we've developed sort of a brain trust of a bunch of nonprofits whose interests are about border issues and migrant issues, and they're helping us to think of ways that we can bring this to new audiences, including possibly to members of Congress. So we are working very hard on congressional screenings with politicians who are moderates, basically, whose opinions we feel like we could sway. And that is, again, you sort of picked up on the humanitarian feel of this film, that at least on the, in the literal terms, doesn't take I think by implication, it takes a lot of political stances, but it is not it doesn't have like a left or a right point of view embedded in it, and so we feel like this possibly makes it a good vehicle for some of the points that I think the film's trying to make. And then in terms of there is some sort of, brightness on the horizon, or there is like room here for things to happen, because at the very end of last calendar year, I believe it was on December 31st, the president signed into law by something that had passed the Senate by unanimous consent, which was a bill that provided funding for the kinds of efforts that that Kate Spradley and Eddie Canales are saying are needed, just to basically deal with the issue. It doesn't tackle the root problem of the issue, which is this bigger issue of like border policy, but it does give this badly needed funding to to local, state, the government agencies, to NGOs dealing with it, to basically people dealing with the actual on the ground reality of a dangerous situation in parts of border areas. So that was a big win, and that was something that was co-authored by or co-sponsored by John Cornyn, a Republican, and Kamala Harris, who was a senator at the time. So we are trying to remain optimistic about the potential for political change, even though a lot of the people in this film, when you ask them, we sort of need a change that is bigger than is currently in the offing, which is kind of a whole different perspective on what our values ought to be at the border, and that basically like this militarized approach is one that ever since it was started has not achieved its purpose. Detention prevention through deterrence just is simply it's just a clear failure if prevention was the actual goal, right? It hasn't prevented anything, and it has actually made this incredibly dangerous, and so that a different approach is needed.
Well, and I think that's one thing that you do so well in this film, again, is that it's a story I didn't know, because you hear about the very basic border, just basic border issues. And this is more than that. This is what happens after we cross the border, and what happens to all of the people involved. And I just think that that's what makes this such a beautiful film, and really adds to this discussion over what happens and how we can be a better country and take care of people. And I mean, and all people, this tells the story from so many points of view. And I just think that that's really fantastic.
And a lot of the, whatever I was going to say just left my head, so it'll come back.
Well, one last thing that we can talk about too is there anything audience members can do to promote this film, or learn more about this?
You can. I mean, we have some simple links on our website. So if you Google Missing in Brooks County, you'll find your way there. And there are
a great website, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So there are some pretty simple. One is sort of background on the issue. Another one is you can contact your congressperson. So we didn't want to. It's not an exhaustive site, but it does give sort of step one for someone who might want to know more about this. What I was going to say earlier was that, like a lot of things, I think people's opinions about what happens at the border and about immigration issues is very much informed by, what images that they consume in the media. And most people and politicians who have an agenda for this, who are pushing some of those images, but that that actually living on the border is just a really very specific, very different thing. And that we wanted to actually place people like what it's like to actually be near there, and to be in a place that is affected by what's happening right over there, as opposed to sort of like just more ideologically based things like this is we want to let you see what goes on,
And I think you do that so well. I mean, I really can't commend you enough for the editing in particular, but the entire film. I mean, it really blew me away, and I commend all of you for telling such an important story, and staying with it, and with everything that's happening there. And we really thank you so much for allowing us to share it with our audiences here at RiverRun, and we wish you all of the best going forward with the film too.
Thank you. And I just want to shout out to all the people who helped us make this film, and to the two co-directors who were actually there for all of this time, who they have a great document about sort of their director's statement, where they just sort of list some of the experiences that they had never had before of, being in snake boots. And I mean, being in Falfurrias is not a place of fine dining, for instance. And so
Right.
eating again and again and again at, one of the 3 places you can get food. And at times, like, the food at the gas station was really the best option in town, to just, like, meeting all sorts of people who, again, are not in the film. So anyways, I just want to shout out to them and to all of the people along the way who, at a very early point, like, believed in this film. So Fork Films, for instance, who came on as partners very, very early, before we had any substantial funding. And when we began, they were, primarily really consultants. They were helping us try to raise money. They weren't putting in a lot of money themselves, although they did later on. But it was, this is a bit of a cliche in documentary land, but it is an endeavor that takes a certain amount of faith,
Yeah.
and as well as a lot of other things.
It's not for the faint of heart making documentaries.
No.
I think you have to really and truly believe in it. And I think that's what comes out in the best documentaries. You can see you see all that love and you see all that belief in the subject. And
so anyways, on behalf of this large collection of people, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you again for letting us share it with our audiences. Thank you so much, Jacob.
Yeah.